Do you remember the Norman Rockwell painting of the family sitting around the dinner table? In many homes, dinner time is chaotic and nothing like that painting. When we do have the chance to eat together, the menu sometimes consists of recipes passed down our family tree. In those moments, these recipes bond us as a family and teach us about where we come from. This is my paternal grandmother, Dorothy. She was born in Pennsylvania, but her parents were immigrants from Yugoslavia. Throughout her life, she lived in communities where she kept the traditions of her Croatian culture alive. She was an amazing cook and whipped up delicious meals created from old country recipes. She also made sure she passed the recipes down to her children. When my grandmother came to visit, we enjoyed our time together. I loved hearing stories, and most of all, I loved eating her fabulous cooking. She would come at Christmas time and bring special cookies that we gobbled up. A favorite culinary memory was her stuffed cabbage. It warmed our tummies, and we could feel her love wrapped up in those cabbage rolls. Unfortunately, she passed away when my oldest was just a baby. One way I can share the story of my grandmother with my children is to teach them the recipes that have been passed down from generations before them. The stuffed cabbage recipe was taught to Grandma by her mother. She taught my mother, who then taught me. I've continued the tradition with my own children. Keeping my grandmother's memory alive has inspired me to share the recipe in this presentation. The first step in the stuffed cabbage journey is to gather the necessary ingredients. Fatty meat is best because it increases the sauce flavor. If you are looking for low fat, this probably isn't the meal for you. Moving along, let's prepare the cabbage for cooking. Take the cabbage head and peel off a few of the top worn leaves. Rinse the head with water. Holding the cabbage down, use a knife and make cuts about an inch deep around the entire core. This will make it easier to separate the cabbage leaves from the core after cooking. When the cutting is done, put the cabbage in a stock pot. With the cabbage in the pot, fill it with enough water to cover the head completely. Boil the cabbage until the leaves begin to soften and become slightly transparent. Be careful not to overcook because the leaves will tear when filling. Drain the water and let the cabbage cool. In a large mixing bowl, combine the meat, eggs, Worcestershire sauce, salt, pepper, and rice together. This is the mixture that will eventually be placed into the rolls. Back in the olden days, these ingredients could feed a family, even if they were on a tight budget. The next part of making the stuffed cabbage involves getting your hands dirty. Or you can involve your kids and get their hands dirty. This is the family bonding part of making this meal. Extra hands are good for mixing up the ingredients really well. Some may be reluctant about sticking their hands in the goo. Notice my daughter is only using one hand. Let's get back to the cabbage. Now that it's cool enough to handle, pull the leaves away from the cabbage head and stack them on a plate. As you get further down, the leaves will be too small for rolls. Cut those up into small pieces to be added later. It's messy hand time again. Put one leaf in front of you and place a small amount of the meat mixture in the center of the roll. Don't add too much meat. The amount will depend on leaf size. My teenage daughter and I have spent quality time preparing these rolls. I'm sure my grandmother and her mom had similar quality moments while cooking. When you are done placing the meat on the leaf, fold the sides over and overlap the edges. The meat needs to be sealed tightly inside or else it will fall out during cooking. If you have added too much meat, remove and rewrap. Don't worry if some of the rolls are bigger than others. Smaller ones will be perfect for smaller tummies. After folding over the edges, push the ends into the meat mixture to seal the roll. The roll needs to be tightly closed. This is a difficult part of this process and will take some practice to make perfect. Here's a picture of a roll I made. Someday my daughter will show her children how her mom taught her how to make these beautiful creations. This stuffed cabbage is almost ready for cooking. Place the completed rolls into the dish or pot they will be cooked in. This recipe will make 12 to 14 rolls depending on the size of your leaves and how much meat you place in them. I have a family of 4, and that is just enough for dinner and a small amount of leftovers for the next day. This is the part where you add the cut up cabbage left over from earlier. After doing that, pour the 2 cans of tomato soup over the rolls and pieces of cabbage. The soup will be part of the base of the sauce the rolls simmer in. Once the soup is added, open the cans of sauerkraut and spread over the top. If you prefer, you don't have to add all of the sauerkraut. After adding the last of these remaining ingredients, pour enough water to cover the cabbage and everything else in the pot or dish. Stir as well as you can to spread the soup, sauerkraut, and water around the rolls. One thing you can notice here is that my ingredients are at the very top of the pot. This can cause boil over, so make sure your pot is big enough to hold everything. In the days of my grandmother, a large stock pot was placed on the stove and the stuffed cabbage simmered in the juices for a few hours until cooked. As much as I want to keep the old traditions alive, I don't have time to stand over the stove watching a pot boil. I use the crock pot and cook on high for 6 hours while I do other things. Just a warning that your house will smell like good, old-fashioned home cooking while the cabbage simmers. Once cooked, turn off the heat, scoop rolls into a bowl, and add some of the juices and sauerkraut. Some people may prefer to add additional salt and pepper. Homemade bread or rolls can complete this meal and are good for sopping up extra juices left in the bowl. We don't always have the time to sit down as a family to eat dinner, but when the stuffed cabbage is prepared, everyone gathers around the table and we are able to talk about our present and future lives, or remembering the past and my grandmother. My children never really knew her, but they are able to experience a small bit of her while eating something she loved to cook. I hope you have enjoyed learning how to make my grandmother's yummy stuffed cabbage. Do you have food memories from your past? If so, I'd encourage you to find these recipes and get cooking. It's a great way to learn about those who came before us while bonding as a family at the same time. Bon appetit!